One of the great things about power tools is that they make a lot of different kinds of work available to a lot of different kinds of people. And, you know, for craftspeople, the advent of power tools, and good ones at that, really gives them an opportunity to do some great work. And I'm going to use my cousin here, Rodger Myers, as an example. Rodger is a computer guy by profession, but he's a craftsman by choice, and a very good one. So, Rodger, I just want to know a little bit about your background, how you got in, how long have you been doing woodworking, and how did you get into it?
Well, hey, Gary. I've been doing woodworking for about 5 years now, give or take, and I really stumbled onto it by necessity. When I first moved to Omaha, after being gone for several years, I rented a house that had wood floors. And I have 2 dogs. I have a beagle and I have a golden retriever.
Yeah.
And I had bowls like these steel bowls sitting on the wood floors, and they would move them all over, and eventually they would dump them over.
Sure.
And it wasn't something that I was really willing to clean up every day, so I decided they needed some of those bowls that stood up on the little pedestals.
Right.
And those were very expensive.
So, but you made some, right?
I did. So the very first thing I made, I went and borrowed a couple power tools from my dad, because I had never made anything.
Right.
And I made this box with holes in the top for these bowls.
Right.
And so the first project I ever did was that.
Yeah, okay. And did you glue the dog hair on there just to make them feel at home?
They needed to feel more at home.
That's detail work that I guess I wouldn't have thought of. No, but so it did the purpose. It served the purpose. It was inexpensive to do.
Absolutely, and I enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about this is real basic, but I learned a lot about woodworking from this.
Right.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
So I started doing a little bit. Most of my projects stem from things that I need around my house.
Sure.
But I started doing more and more projects, and eventually, you know, your skills get a little bit better.
So you've done, I mean, we could go on and on. I've seen your work, and I really, really like it. But you've done some really cool things for gifts and for yourself as well, for people. And this is just a sample of a few of the things that you've made. Talk a little bit about this. This is a trivet, correct?
Yeah, this is a trivet that's, you know, for putting hot pots and pans on. And this is just a solid 6x6 piece of oak. Mm-hmm. And I basically cut holes or strips on each side.
Use the table saw for something like that?
I used just a dado set and a table saw, and then sanded the crap out of it and put a finish on it.
How long did it take you to make that?
I made 5 of these in about a half an hour.
Yeah, that's cool. And those are good for self-use or for gifts.
It was. I gave 4 of them away, and only got to keep 1 because I showed a picture of it and people liked them.
Well, cool. Well, so cutting boards. Now, these cutting boards I think are really cool. Now, talk a little about this one, what it's made out of and how you made it.
Okay, well, this is actually my cutting board that sits in my kitchen. It's about 4 years old, I think, now. And it is made, this one is maple and purple heart, which are both very hard woods. Mm-hmm. And it's an end grain cutting board, so that it's easier on my knives and it won't get cut up as badly. Mm-hmm. And basically, I'm taking strips of purple heart and maple, cutting them to specific widths, mm-hmm. gluing them all together, and then cutting them again so that I can eventually get to this pattern that I want, and re-gluing them a second time. So sanded it down and then put handholds in the bottom.
Sure. So you did this, and you kept this one, but you've given others similar to this away as gifts, and I would imagine that's a great sense of gratification to do that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I've done some in different patterns. I've got a brick pattern that I've given away, and I could go get some of these back. This is a gift that I'm giving away soon, mm-hmm. and it's the same woods as the first one. You can see this one still has a lot more purple to it.
Right.
And then the one I'm especially proud of, this is one I did for my brother and my sister-in-law for their wedding in October, and it's cherry top with a walnut base, and it
has a drawer in there somewhere, doesn't it?
Has a drawer in there somewhere that slides out. There it is.
Yeah.
It's upside down, but it holds the knives.
Right.
And then the knives are on very strong magnets, so they can actually take this with the knives in it and hold it upside down and they don't fall out. So it's safe as well.
Very nice. So it makes nice gifts and it makes a nice thing for you to do. I want to talk a little bit about tools, but I want to mention you've made some big lifestyle changes over the past few years. You quit smoking, which to me, I quit smoking 25 years ago. That's not easy. One of the things that I read and that I heard from a lot of people when I quit smoking was keep busy. Don't give yourself time to think about cigarettes and those kind of things. So has woodworking helped you in that respect at all, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I quit smoking. It's been about 2 years now since I quit smoking, but getting myself heavily involved in anything in my shop really takes my mind off of not just, maybe not just even smoking, but takes my mind off any troubles that I might have, and it gives me time to listen to music and think, basically.
I think you told me it's more relaxing than golf. I believe that.
It's absolutely more relaxing for me than golf. I haven't played golf in 5 years, and I don't miss it a bit.
And you also said you lost, what, 110 pounds in a year?
About 110 pounds in just under a year.
And do you find that woodworking helps you in that respect too? Gives you things to think about and keeps you active and busy?
Keeps me away from the kitchen for sure.
Well, but then you make cutting boards, so that takes you back in there. So let's talk a little bit about tools, Rodger. I know you mentioned when you started your woodworking that you basically borrowed some tools from your dad. And over the years, as I look around, I can see that you've added some pretty nice tools to your collection here for your woodworking project. But what kind of advice would you give to people who are interested in starting out? People don't have to spend a fortune on tools to get into woodworking, correct?
No, not at all. I mean, I've got some basic tools laid out here on my bench that I could probably make almost any project with just these tools. And none of them, although these are a little bit more expensive varieties of these tools, most of these tools can be had for less than $100. And all of them would get me into woodworking. This is all I really had to start with, was a drill, circular saw, and a jigsaw.
All right. So it's okay to have to not buy the most expensive circular saws or drills that you can buy, but you want to buy something that'll at least hold up through the course of a project.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think you need to go out and spend $200 on a circular saw. You can buy a fairly nice one for $40 to $50 that, if you're not going to be out in the shop every day and you're just doing some simple projects, would work just fine for most of what you want to do. Now,
I know over the course of time you have added to your collection, and I think you mentioned that with some of these tools anyway, that you've, instead of going right out and buying a replacement when one breaks or whatever, you've saved up a little bit of money and then you have gone out and bought a little better stuff, but you do a lot of woodworking. Is that kind of the balance there?
Yeah, I use my tools a lot, and I use them, pretty rough sometimes, and I wanted something that will always give me the same amount of power. I'm never going to have to worry about it breaking. And a lot of times when I replace a tool, especially one of my bigger tools, I want something that's hopefully the last tool I'm going to have to buy. So
you look for quality, you look for something that'll work. And I noticed that you're buying, for example, these little puppies from DeWalt that use the same battery systems. You're buying things that are a little more compatible as opposed to having 5 different kinds.
Yeah, and more I'm starting to replace tools as I need to with things that have similar batteries. I mean, I still have a lot of corded tools, but if this thing ever breaks, I will replace it with a nice battery-operated circ saw.
Sure. Well, notice you've got the Craig device here that we talked about not too long ago in one of our woodworking episodes. I'm really happy to see you have that thing, and you actually use it.
Oh, I love my Craig jig. I mean, I do a lot of things with traditional joinery as well, but if I'm doing something and it's fairly quick, or if I don't need it to be a fine piece of furniture, my Craig jig is great for making nice, strong joints. Your background's computers. Yes.
So you got into woodwork kind of cold. And I know your dad's a very handy guy. So you probably inherited some of that from him. I did not inherit any of it from my father, but he was very good too. But I'm not nearly as good as you. But it looks like you have the temperament and the patience. What do you think if somebody is just going to start, they just want to get into it, top 2 or 3 things you'd tell them to think about?
Build something you need. Because if you're building something for yourself that's going in your house, it's something you're going to have to look at every day, so you're going to take the time to do it correctly. Or build a gift. I throw a lot of things away that I start making if they're gifts, because I want them to be perfect. And I learn as much from my mistakes as I do from my successes with this hobby of mine.
So I don't feel like you got to get it perfect the first time.
No.
Trial and error a little bit?
And if you're doing something new, it's always nice to test it out on cheap pine before you move on to something like oak or maple that's a little bit more expensive wood. Because if I make a mistake with pine, I'm far less upset than if I ruin a $60 piece of oak.
And that's one thing you mentioned too. You like to work with good wood. When you're doing a project, you like to have good quality wood to make, whether it's for yourself or gifts.
Yeah, for the most part, I like to work with oak and walnut and cherry and maple and things like that. I do work with pine occasionally. One of the big trends right now, and something I enjoy working with, is pallet wood. The nice thing about pallet wood is if you can find a good source, they're free, and oftentimes they're oak.
Okay. Well, it looks to me like you've taken this from kind of a, I don't know, kind of from a hobby level to an avocation level. I mean, it's something that you spend a fair amount of time on that you really enjoy. And how important is patience in that whole process?
Pretty important. Woodworking is, I don't know if I'd say unforgiving, but it definitely has its own temperament. And if you're not patient, you'll end up with gaps and joints that don't look quite right. You really have to take the time and do things correctly. You know, most things aren't going to take, you know, this is not a hobby where I can spend a half an hour out here and be done.
Yeah.
I'll spend 4 or 5 hours out here and I still won't be finished with some of the projects.
Sure. Well, and one of the things, you know, to plug, I love power tools, right? I mean, I remember trying to do things with a handsaw and getting frustrated and throwing it all away, and then I remember doing things with circular saws or table saws or whatever and being much happier with the process. But I think that's probably true with anything. Technology moves along, whether it's computers or whether it's power tools, and that's really one of the great things about life today. You know, technology moves along, it moves along in everything we do, and it makes projects, it makes woodworking a lot better than, or a lot easier and a lot more accessible than it used to be. So I guess what I would close with is by saying, to be a little bit commercial about this, is that if you are interested in getting into woodworking, there's a great selection of tools of all price ranges, in all price ranges for you at toolbarn.com, so check it out. And thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time. Rodger, thanks.
Thank you.